So, good evening and welcome to Plein Publiek in the Pleinzaal of the Balie. Plein Publiek is a program where program editors from the Balie invite inspiring filmmakers, writers, all sorts of creative people to talk about their process and their life. Tonight, our guest is Louis Hothothot from China, living in Netherlands for more than 10 years now. And so I will introduce you a bit to our viewers at home and to our audience in the Balie. Louis was born as a second child in 1986 in a small town in central China, less than 10 years after the introduction of one-child policy. He graduated in graphic design at the China Central Academy for Art in Beijing and then moved to the Netherlands, where he studied at the Dutch Art Institute and Netherlands Film Academy. Being born as a so-called black child created complicated emotional relationships for Louis and his family, which he confronted in his debut documentary, 4 Journeys, the opening film of IDFA 2021. His works were exhibited in iFilm Museum, Dansmakers, the Oostblok Theater, and in 2018 he won the 3-package deal Young Talent. In 2022, his playful animations on black and white film history served as the festival campaign of IDFA. So those are all facts about your life, the kind of data that you would see in an encyclopedia entry about Louis Hothothot. And in your work, you also provide a lot of data. You give a lot of information about your family, about China. But between these little evidences that you provide your audience with, there is a lot of essence, I would say. There are a lot of things that give you the essence of your family members, the essence of the family traditions in China, and also of the political situation. So tonight, I hope that we can explore the essence of Louis Hothothot. And that would be basically my first question. Who are you? And who is Louis besides the facts? What is the essence of Louis Hothothot?
Is it the first question? Who am I?
Who are you? Yes.
Well,
strange way to open an interview.
Well, it's a very philosophical question, and I think for all my life, I'm researching who am I, and yeah, I think this question will exist with me all my life. And but firstly, welcome. Thank you very much, and spend your beautiful warm time here, not outside, with me, and I hope we can share the good experience, good time to research about who we are. And I think for all my project, I'm really research who am I, why I'm doing this, why not precisely choose this project and precisely choose Holland to be my home and stay here. So essence is really philosophical and difficult question. What is the essence of myself? And I'm always researching it. And through this project for journeys, I particularly research something, get something, who am I? And I make a big decision to stay in Holland. I think I didn't answer your question, just open more questions.
Yeah, but that also tells something. You're an explorer, and
Yeah.
you're trying to find ways of your own meaning and the meaning of life.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So we know you as a graphic designer, as a book illustrator, as a filmmaker, of course. But on your website, you present yourself as a story listener. Can you tell us what your definition is of a story listener, and how do you see that as a kind of calling?
Yeah, story listener, because I'm a big fan of listening stories. Since I was a kid, I was a quiet kid. I always listen story to try to understand other people's life. And nowadays, I'm a documentary maker. So I'm so curious about other people's life. So I always bring my camera, ask them, can you tell me about your life, your story? And I always think every people nowadays deserve to be filmed and make a portrait film, because every people, if you give their time and in a short time, they told you the most important thing of their life. That's very just the talking and filming is already an amazing project. I tried this method to different people for just finally I made a few short films. Just people in front of the camera talk about their most important thing of their life. Most of them are older than 40 years old, already have some experience. I found that it's amazing. I don't think it's an interview project. I just talk with them, chatting, and I found they are quite every people have their amazing stories. So I'm fantastic about these ideas. For my own family story, for example, my family, my father, I know him well, but through this project, I realized I didn't know them well, and I go deeper and deeper about my own family, and also go deeper through them. I went deeper to the history and the generation story. So I found the personal story is really attractive to me, and through listen, and I learn about the history, society, and so on.
Also about yourself, right?
Yes.
As, Fellini once said that even if I was shooting a film about a dead fish, it would be a film about me.
Oh, totally truth.
And so your books and your films deal with many heavy topics like memory, pain, forgiveness, political issues. They're packed with heavy discussions that you have with your family. But the logline on your website states art is dangerous, art is passionate, art is sexy. So I'm just curious, how do you manage to keep your art sexy even when it's dealing with such difficult topics?
Yeah, being sexy is quite playful actually. Well, I think about because being sexy actually sexiness actually exists in people's imagination, and it means you need to create your own image about something. So I think the art really exists in the imagination, and I try to keep the art attractive to people and offer some something and inspire people to open their own imagination. That's my philosophy about art.
That's a very nice definition of sexy. Is that also where your artistic name comes from?
Yes. I think.
Hot.
Yes.
When did you start using that?
Actually, in the first year I moved to Holland from China. First I dislike the weather. Honestly, I'm from Beijing and very hot. And nowadays it's already kind of 35 degrees, and here is always raining. So I make myself to be more comfortable, ironically, hot.
To balance out the bad weather in Netherlands. Although it's quite hot in our Pleinzaal at this moment with the climate change. Thanks. Let's get to your work. So you start shooting. You made one feature-length documentary, 4 Journeys, and you started shooting way before you knew that what will be the final form of the film, right?
Right.
And because of this, you record a lot, I presume. And how much footage did you say you shot for?
In total, about 500 hours.
500 hours.
Yeah, 4 years of shooting. Yeah.
4 years of shooting, and then how much did it take you to edit this much of footage?
Actually, a year. I spent totally a year.
And do you feel like you've missed that you had to kick out something from the film that was very actually good, just because you cannot have a 4-hour film?
Well, I edited my film and with 2 editors. Actually, very difficult process. You kick out some good moment with your family. So that's the most emotionally difficulty is the most difficult part of editing the film. Yes, of course, I cut lots of moment. I make the painful decision to cut something out. Yeah, quite a difficult process.
I guess it happens to every filmmaker, but with 500 hours of material, it's more of a challenge.
Yeah.
And also your way of making the film is a bit unorthodox. Like you created actually these 3 books that we have on the table came to be before the film.
Yeah.
So you recorded the interviews, Then excerpts from these interviews appear in written form in the books with the photos from the interviews, but then also the book kind of informs the film, like what will be the final form of the film. And I was thinking that it's kind of like where a fiction filmmaker would make a storyboard to decide on the camera angles and I don't know, the wideness of the shot. You kind of navigate through your books. Using your books, you navigate through the emotional landscape of your film. So in a way, they become like emotional storyboards. Is it a nice definition?
I'm not sure. It's because when I think about a storyboard, I think it's a more functional use because it's a tool to service how do you organize things, how to editing. But for me, I think the book is it themselves could stand alone as an art piece. So for me, it's because I'm a graphic designer. I always think graphic design is my mother tongue. Because I was trained in my bachelor program, I was a graphic designer. Afterward, I worked 4 years as a designer in Beijing, and then I moved here. So when I made the first film, actually, the first book is this one, 12 Moment. It made in 2017. I think we can share the book with. So in 2017 is the first time I went back to China after living in Holland for 5 years. So I didn't know I was making film, just bring the camera to catch the materials as much as possible. So 3 months later, I bring 100 hours footage back to Amsterdam. I don't know how to use the 100 hours materials. So I think my mother tongue is graphic design. So use graphic design way is the most comfortable and easy way for me to tell story. So the first book, 12 Moment, I kind of selected 12 scenes. Based
I was just about to say that in your film it's evident that you're a graphic designer, but in your books it's also evident that you're a filmmaker. Like in every, because you call them scenes as well. They're structured like a film, and the design and the sentences kind of dictate a rhythm that I would say is inherent to a filmmaker. Like maybe I'm also biased as a filmmaker myself, but when I read your books, I already imagine scenes in my head. With the atmosphere of the scene itself. So when did you become aware of this fact that like when did you discover that filmmaking is actually something that is good for you to express yourself in?
That's a good question. I think after I finished the first book, I realized this book is a graphic design project, but also tells story. So people give me so much confidence. People's reaction, they receive my message through the book. They know I'm making film. So in the second book, I made in 2018. So the 17th, 18th, 19th, and another journey in 2020.
And then the film in 2021.
Film finished in 2021. So in the second book, I realized using design to make a film project. That's what did I aware.
But the books that we have here today are not published.
No.
They're only. Do you have any plans to make?
Yes. Now I'm working with a publisher in Holland. We plan to.
Some of these or something new?
No, this one, the
nice.
first one. Yeah.
So I guess you have the exclusive opportunity to see them before they get published.
Yeah.
Another thing that I really find amazing in your work is how seamlessly you navigate between the personal, political, poetic, and like whatever media that is, you know. And in one passage in one of the books, you're comparing your sister's unrealistic wishes when it comes to her husband, that she wants everything in one man, to the Chinese state idea that they can have capitalism and socialism in one system.
Yeah.
And there was a sentence that said, both my sister and Chinese society make my father feel unsafe and anxious. I just thought. So maybe this is a good moment to show an excerpt of your work also to our viewers at home that illustrates it. And together with Louis, we selected one chapter from the book and one excerpt from the film. Yeah. So I will read it now. And you can also see it on the big screen if everything is well. Yeah, so the chapter is the same pace. I'll just find it now.
Page 58.
So it says, Amsterdam, 3 a.m., Beijing, 10 a.m., National Day, the sound of military boots in my father's room. I have never seen my father in such concentration before. Normally, his attention moves quickly. He often looks around. My mom once made fun of him. Your head often turns like a rattle drum, she said. But my father's head doesn't move now. He's immersed in his screen, which shows him the troop review in Tiananmen Square. His tough hands hold his phone strongly. My mom's hand, half open. She's falling asleep gently. My father once told me that he dreamed of becoming a soldier when he was a kid. I asked, in the Air Force or the Navy, how far would you have liked to go? But my father said that he wanted to be Mao's guard, stand in front of Mao's door. I was so disappointed. I even criticized him in my mind. To be a door guard, what a loser. When my father was young, neither was China at war, nor was it preparing for war. But Mao predicted, China and US will have a war. World War III will happen. We should prepare to deal with a nuclear war. I think this imagination of war must strongly affect how my father understands the world. When I was a kid, my father taught me like this, to be brave like a soldier, to have a strong will like a soldier, to listen like a soldier, to be in time like a soldier, to get up early like a soldier, to brush teeth like a soldier, to practice writing like a soldier, like a soldier. Even nowadays, my father still believes the US is an enemy of China, and it was they who incited the Hong Kong protests for independence. I hear the reporter saying, go forward, we won't forget our aims, a new age is coming, the dream of a nation is becoming a reality. Oh, my China, you're full of hope, your stride is strong. The red flag moves with the wind, balloons and white pigeons fly, the formations advance. The celebrations look exactly as they did decades ago. Only the fabric liberation shoes have been replaced by boots. The footsteps, the pace, has never changed. In 70 years, they have never changed. And so the chapter ends here and continues with a chapter in the book about the visit to the Chinese embassy in Rotterdam. And now we will see an excerpt from the film that came from this chapter.
父亲的老朋友，那个有双胞胎狮子的手表没有带来。他说这个手表太老了，已经走不动了。我带着父亲参加中国大使馆组织的国庆宴会，来宾多数是荷兰政商两界的华人，人们不断的敬酒。这个时候的父亲最符合母亲的比喻，脑袋像个拨浪鼓，左右，左，提左，右，右，左。小时候，他经常抱怨我，因为我上不去了。在他的规划中，他本应是个左右逢源的政客，本应在这样的场合打上领带， 和所有人握手干杯，而不是一个人在角落里坐着。33年后的今天，我才清楚地看到，哦，父亲，因为我，你的人生失去了什么
？So, do you want to tell us something more about these sequences? Why did you choose them?
Well, I think the first is it's an important scene for me, for my life and for the film, because I now I give more information about this scene. In 2019 is the first time I invited my family to Holland, and they stay here for 3 months. Because before we always have the kind of broken family relationship, and through 2 years research, I started to fix more and more the brokenness with my family. And until 2019, I invited them to come here to understand my life. This moment I realized the generation gap between me and with my father, the generation, we don't understand each other. We have different value. Not only a personal story, a personal issue, but also is a society issue. Actually, I born and grew up in 1980s. This generation have the biggest gap with the families, because China in 80s, 90s, China experienced the big transition from a socialism country to capitalism country. It's a very big radical change. So all the Chinese family have the value gap, value difference. And I was slow until 2019. I realized my father and me, our difficulty is not a personal issue. But I learned a lot in 2019 when they visited Holland. It's the first time they visiting Europe, and they get out from China to receive the new world, different world. And we talk a lot. We travel. We would share ideas. How do you see the world, the Western world, and Chinese politics?
He was a bit shocked that in the West people actually live peaceful lives, not lives.
And in his mind, and always think, kind of in the subtle, very small awareness or small thing, and he thinks Western world is very different, and Western world is kind of enemy-like. But that's from the political effect. But actually, in the human level, he truly believes Western life is good. And because I'm happy here, I told him I'm happy here. So he believes and he supports me to live in the West. So I think he have the confusion and have his own questions. But when he was here and he received the message, and he also grew up. That's a very good process.
In these excerpts, we see him quite vulnerable, and you're not afraid of like showing the vulnerability of you and your family members. And what I also really appreciated in it is the attention that you give to details, the things that you normally don't notice, like how somebody moves, or what in particular way they're holding their hands, or these sort of things. Is it something that were you always really tuned in for details, or is it something that you discovered as a filmmaker with through the camera lens?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Yes. I realize. I think when I made this scene, I didn't when I filmed it, I didn't realize his body language is quite interesting. When I editing and when I make the book, actually I started to read the footage, and watch the footage again and again, and I realize how he move and to find out the interesting part. I think the camera really give you so much possibility to understand the reality. In the reality, the time passed very quickly. You didn't pay attention, but when you watch the footage, that's the power of the camera. They frozen the time, and you go back to the time and learn new things.
And not just your camera, but also you use a lot of photographs, right? Like when you dig out a family archive and you actually pay attention to the photos, you can discover many things about your ancestors and your family members.
Yeah, I call this process the reading image. Reading image is going back, revisiting the past. That's a good process for learning.
But I wanted to get back to something that you said as an answer to the previous question, that how like the big generation gap exists between you and your father. And I also read it that way, that it's not just your personal story, but that it's a story about the different generations in China.
Yeah.
There are many things, like at some point your father says, individualism is the cancer of society and art should tell people what to do. And then you say, I do not want to make conclusions for audiences, but I suggest audiences come to their own conclusions. And then just your father is talking about the sin of capitalism, and you decided to move to the heart of capitalism, basically to the country that invented capitalism, where individualism is celebrated. So, you know, your family sacrificed so much to have one more child. You say, my parents traveled 4,200 kilometers with my 2-year-old sister in order to find a safe place to give birth to me. My father was forced to pay a financial fine equal to 3 years of his salary. And then you, on the other side, you live here free, and you, for now, decided not to have children. And you're no exception. China has cancelled its one-child policy and is now actually struggling with the birth rates that are falling. And so I wanted to ask you, that do you think that a bridge, a kind of a dialogue between the old and the new China is possible, or will this change come suddenly with it? I don't know if it was a clear question.
It's a clear question. Actually, new and old China can be bridged. I think, for generations, for humans, if you have love, you always try to find a bridge to connect with people you don't understand. That's my experience. I think people always, I always have the hope, at least me, I always have the hope to try to understand people who see me as enemy or people I don't understand. Use film, use art, you get the access to do it.
To try to dissolve the pain.
Yeah.
I like this quote a lot. It says, if memories have been frozen in the past, it will take more than time to dissolve the pain. And speaking of the memories frozen in the past, at one point you say, I think of cinema as a digital cemetery. Can you tell us what did you mean by that?
Cemetery, well, in my Chinese tradition, actually cemetery is a kind of a place for education younger generation. Let them to know the history of who is this guy, who is this grief, and how this older generation contribute things for our family, and so on and so on. See, actually, cemetery is a storage of memory about the past. I think nowadays, we just talk about the camera, the power of camera. Another power is camera could also be the storage. The cinema could be the storage of the past and let us to learn what happened and try to find who we are. And we all from the past. Yeah, that's my understanding about how the cinema to the history.
And in your film, you confront your family members quite openly about many painful topics with their emotions, and a lot of traditions appear in the film that from our Western point of view seem quite strange. At some point they say that dead children are not allowed to be buried in family graves, and your uncle says, where else but in wastelands should kids be buried, together with outsiders, homeless, crazy people and dogs. And then there is a story of a man who destroyed the face of his dead son with a spade so that the witch cannot recognize him and the rest of the kids can grow up safe. And you confronted also your family with questions about your older brother who died before you were born, buried in an unmarked grave. And you actually made them visit his grave. And I was curious, speaking of the power of cinema, you ask these naive, blunt questions and you don't mind confronting the harsh answers that they give you. And I was curious, what gave you this power? Like, how did you get to this point? The camera helps for sure, the distance of the camera that you put between you and the people you talk to, but did the fact that you lived outside of China also help? Like this distance, both time and spatial distance.
Yes, I think so. I think distance helped a lot. Give me the courage. Give me the courage to face about the difficult past. But I think more courage come from my confusion. I have so much question about the China, the contemporary China. I know all the problem comes from the past. So if I want to figure out why, what happened nowadays, we have so much problem. I have to research about the past. And about my brother's story, why my dead brother, when he was died, he was kind of 1.5 years. He's not allowed to buried in the family cemetery, but in the kind of wild place with dogs, with homeless. So I don't understand. I think that's for me it's quite a big question. I have to research. I have to confront with the classical age, classical culture, and kind of tradition culture. Why not only about my family, also all the generation, all the older generation, they deal with this thing in the same way. So that's a cultural issue.
And I noticed that in a lot of these dynamics of interfamily relations and your own life, I guess, guilt plays a big part. And with these questions, with these confrontations, you were uncovering a lot of guilt. And there's another quote from your book that says, guilt is like watergrass binding us together by the roots. So I wanted to ask you, do you feel like this guilt has been reduced since these confrontations? Did you have a chance to talk to them after the interviews that you did for the film, the research that you did, but also after the screening of the film? Have they seen the film, and do you think it was a healing process for your family?
I think for sure it's a healing process. When people talk about the guilt and they are there to confront with the pain in the past and their shadow of life, and that's talking. Just talking is already the good process for healing. I think every year I stay with my family for 3 months to talk about the meaningless things. For them is really, wow, why you ask so much painful question? Is it necessary to know it? It's nothing to do with the economic and with your work, and but that's
Talk
my
about
work.
The weather.
Talk about the weather, easy question, happiness. That's the normal people prefer to do.
But then the pain stays buried inside, right?
Yeah, and people don't want to share about it, and so I have to force them. Of course, you can say again, the camera gave me the power to ask again and again. Yeah, but finally, I think if you see the second book, my mother doesn't want to talk much about my brother's death. But in the first journey, in 2 years later, my mother was there to go to my brother's grief for the first time.
You planted flowers on his grave and kind of marked his existence.
Yeah, and that's the big step for my mother. That's a healing. You see it.
And you feel like now when you talk to them, they've opened up more about their emotions? Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think you could facilitate something like this outside of your family? Like, could you imagine yourself doing a similar project with my family or with family from somebody from the audience?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I don't know if I can go very deep and intimate with other families. I don't know. But it's possible if because you take time, build an intimate relationship. Now I'm working for another project. It's nothing to do with my family.
Another film project.
Another film project is an American lady. I stay kind of 5 years with her, build the very good trust, and go deeper and deeper. And now she invited me to go to her family to see more things, to understand her more. I think the film process of the filming people is really about understanding people, to share time, and not only about the knowledge, about the life. Building relationship, building the connection. I think even watching a film is kind of going to another people's life intimately. That's another power of cinema.
For sure. No, I truly believe that the final stage of making a film actually happens in the cinema, in the viewer's minds, not in the editing table.
No. Actually, it exists with communication with audiences.
What I do with your film is actually your film. What it does to me, how it helps me maybe open up in my family and confront my own things, or whatever the topic of the film is. So one of the things that we always ask the guests of the Plein Publiek is to bring something that they found inspiring in the recent times. It could be an object, it could be anything, and you decided to bring a digital object. So let's take a look, and then you can tell us what it is. So that was another cemetery?
Another cemetery in Germany, actually. I was there a few days ago, and I found it's quite interesting. I interested in the contrast, because in the cemetery very quiet, and I also interested in the form of the grave. It's very simple.
The form of the graves.
It's very simple. So I just curious about it. They still there for kind of 80 years. The only thing is moving is behind there. There's a water tube.
And the grass is growing.
Yeah.
Do you record a lot of things when you're moving around? And you never know if there will be a film made out of it?
No. Just use my telephone. Catch something interesting to me.
And do you go back to China more in the recent times?
I now my work is every year I go back to China to film something, and basically I digest my footage in Holland. That's the process.
Nice. And I was just curious about the film. Of course, it's not a political film, but there are also things like is China being oppressive about information about the one-child policy and all the effects that it had on people? Is it okay to talk about it in Chinese public space?
They have lots of restriction, but it's okay to talk about it now.
And do you think because there were so many children like you who couldn't get their papers, who were going to school and didn't get books because they were a second child, they were illegal people basically, and that left many traumas for millions of people in China. Is there any kind of attempt to talk about this trauma, to help these people? Are they being organized by the state or themselves? And do you think it would be even interesting? Like, would you take part in something like this?
You mean if I can talk about this or the collective memory with the other second kid?
Are there any efforts to kind of treat this collective trauma? Because I'm sure that here, for example, it would already happen. You have like 5 foundations and NGOs and something dealing like people meeting up to talk about this and the effects that it had on them, probably some reparations from the state. Do you think something like this would ever be possible in China?
For my knowledge, not very possible. Yeah, it's still is something government doesn't want to touch. Yeah.
And in your books, there are also some, moments of critique. Like, are you afraid, like, once they get published, that you will have some issues when returning to China?
I don't think my book is firstly it's not a political story. It's a very human story.
Very personal.
Yeah, very personal, and there's some element behind quite sensitive, but it's still the main thing that we talk about the essence. Essence is kind of is about human emotions. So I think it's fine.
Should be okay.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. So one other custom that we have here in the Balie is that our guests ask a question for the next week's guest. And our next week's guest is Herine Wensink. She's a writer and a critic. So what is the question that you would like us to ask her?
Oh, I learned she's also writing a book about her family. And nowadays, I think she's a young Dutch lady write research about her family. And now I found it's quite interesting have the comparison with mine. My question about how the weather will affect her thought to think about the family. For example, the same story when she think about it in the winter and in the summer, will she have different ideas, understanding or perspective about the thing?
The weather in the time of writing about these events, or the weather? Oh, okay.
How the weather affect her
writing process,
learning, and writing process. Yeah,
that's a very curious question. So thank you, Louis, for the conversation. We will now close off for our viewers at home. Thank you very much for following this conversation, and we will stay here for a couple of more questions from the audience, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much.